Standing on the green fields of France, it's hard to imagine that 100 years ago, 15,000 Canadian volunteers captured Vimy Ridge and did what some considered impossible and made it possible. It's hard to imagine until you stand on Vimy Ridge, where you can still see the shell holes, the craters, and the barbed wires from 100 years ago, when the 4 Canadian divisions fought together for the first time and paved the way for the nation we see here today. In 1917, Arthur Currie opened up the door to Brigadier General Byng's office for the first time. He was there to discuss his upcoming assault of Vimy Ridge, which in the previous year, thousands of French and British soldiers lost their lives in an attempt to retake. And now, it was the Canadians' turn. Soon the two men agreed upon 2 things. First, that if they were going to be successful at Vimy Ridge, they would have to plan every detail. No stone could be left unturned. And second, that their men, the Canadians, all 15,000 of them, volunteered to be there. None of them had to be. And they all had one singular goal in mind, to get back home in one piece. Regrettably, thousands of men never came home at all, and thousands more came home but a fraction of the person they once were. This was the reality of the First World War. Over the following 6 months, every single man on that battlefield was trained where to go and what to do. They were even shown maps that were previously for officers' eyes only. Never had such respect been given to an enlisted man. Never had such respect been given to a Canadian. Imagine a young sergeant from Calgary, Alberta. Just 2 years ago, he was on his high school's rowing team, rowing his way to a national victory. And yet today, he's over 50,000 kilometers from home, standing in a place he never knew existed, standing in the dirt and filth-ridden trenches of Vimy Ridge. And he knows that on the sound of the whistle, he'll get up, move over the trench, over the fields, up a hill, towards a fate no one can know. And just before the whistle blows and he leaves that trench, he's tapped on the shoulder by his brother, who asks, "Hey, Jim, do you think we're going to make it to Berlin today?" To this, the sergeant puts on a big smile and looks at his brother and says, "Yes, and I'll get you a drink from the closest Hofbrau." At this, the 2 men smile just for a second, because they know they're getting beer at the end of the day. And in that moment, no matter how small, all of the pressure and the anxiety of being on the front lines disappears. Until the whistle blows and they're out of that trench, moving forward across the plain, one step after the other. Just before the sergeant reaches his enemy's lines, he sees 2 men go down. The first was a businessman from Ontario, a proud man. And the second was an immigrant from Nigeria, who just 1 year before immigrated to Canada. He was so proud to sign up for his new country, so proud to show his patriotism and his loyalty. When the 2 men fell, the blood pooled, and was only one shade of red. By the end of that day, the Canadians had pushed further into the German-held territory than had ever been done before. It was a victory not measured in centimeters, meters, or hectares. It was a victory measured in kilometers, all 26 of them. It's interesting to think that 100 years ago, 15,000 Canadian volunteers from every corner of our country worked together to do something that was impossible. They were from Toronto, Calgary, Saskatchewan, every province and territory, every small town. It's even more interesting to think that 100 years ago, on that day in 1917, it didn't matter if you were a Christian, Muslim, or Jewish person. The only thing that mattered on that day is that you were a Canadian, because it was the Canadians who were taking Vimy Ridge. That same level of tenacity is seen each and every day in Canada. And I'm not suggesting for one moment that we all go into our offices, sit down, hold hands, and sing Kumbaya. because that just wouldn't work. Nor do I suggest that we all put on 20-kilogram backpacks and run up and down hills for 2 hours before we walk into our office, because we just have backaches. But what we do is at every single high school, elementary school, private school in Canada, every student and teacher stands together for the playing of O Canada. And in that 2.5 minutes, it doesn't matter where your race, culture, gender, or ethnicity is. It doesn't matter if you're in science class or in detention. The only thing that matters is that you're a Canadian, and that is something special. 100 years ago, 15,000 men from all across our nation worked together to turn the impossible into the possible. 100 years ago, the 4 Canadian divisions fought together for the first time and paved the way for the nation we see here today. That's why we remember Vimy Ridge.
The future is inevitable. Technology will always advance. But with the advancement of technology comes millions of new questions. Good evening, honorable judges, guests, competition, friends, family, and cadets. Take the invention of the drone, for example. Is it friend or foe? Good or bad? I, for one, believe that drones are both a new and fundamental technology to our developing world. One of the most prominent uses we see drones with today is with small businesses. As drones are relatively cheap compared to a chartered helicopter ride, they're very popular among small businesses that are looking for professional-grade aerial photography at a cheap price. For example, real estate agents commonly use drones to take aerial shots of properties. Lately, we've even been seeing people use drones to take wedding photos from a bird's eye view. Even now, we are beginning to see companies use drones to deliver packages. Just one of the perks of using drones is that they require no expensive training or equipment to operate them. They are also easily available on the internet and in stores everywhere. Drones are small and easy to transport, so what's not to love? All in all, I truly believe that drones provide a big reward with a small investment and are a great opportunity for any small business. Drones aren't just for small businesses, though. People all over the world use drones for safety and protection. One of these cases is with the military. The military commonly uses drones to spot IEDs, landmines, and for reconnaissance in areas that's too dangerous for humans. Believe it or not, but even the police are using them nowadays for surveillance of buildings or a general area. This keeps the police safe, and then they know what kind of situation they're getting into. This also allows the police to keep tabs on people without wasting the manpower. And I know this is going to be a hard one to believe, but nowadays, even farmers are beginning to use drones to inspect their crops or their property. And some farmers have gone above and beyond and are now using drones to see if their crops are sick using infrared cameras. That's an incredible use of technology. I truly believe that drones are going to become commonplace soon with all of their applications towards our safety. Even though some of the most prominent uses for drones are in the business and protection area, drones are incredibly universal. Labs and scientists alike use drones to conduct research and experiments. Just one of the perks of using drones for science and research is the bird's eye view. With drones, we can see objects or landscapes from different perspectives. This can help to give scientists a better viewpoint on something they're studying. Another plus of drones in the science and research industry is that they can survey large areas with an overall view. This can help to give scientists a better viewpoint and can help them to take a survey. And speaking of surveys, frankly, that's one of the best uses for drones in regards to science and research. Drones can survey an area of land without even disturbing the environment. This is key because when you're conducting research, it is important to keep all of the variables the same so that you provide accurate results. So, with all of these applications in the science and research industry, what's not to love about drones? So I've talked about how drones are great for businesses, jobs, and industries, but how are they great for you? Well, drones are so much fun to fly. You get to feel like a pilot. And the best part is that anyone can do it. With the ease and inexpensiveness of flying a drone, anyone can become a pilot. And the best part is that you can fly them anywhere. Due to their small size, drones can take off and land from virtually anywhere. They also don't need a runway because of their vertical takeoff. This means that you can fly a drone in your backyard. But due to the safety of others, some places are off limits for drone flights. For example, you can't fly a drone near an airport because you could endanger the lives of other people. But just because you can't fly near an airport doesn't mean that flying drones isn't fun. Flying drones is so much fun because they give us a new perspective of our world. We're so used to seeing our Earth from the ground, and drones are our first real chance to explore the sky for ourselves without spending thousands of dollars on a plane ticket. Drones truly embody freedom, and that is what I believe makes them so much fun. In conclusion, with all of these uses for drones in our advancing world, we need to ask ourselves one question. Is this progress, or are drones becoming a threat? My answer to that is this. We have seen the many applications of drones. We have heard about how they will protect us, keep us safe, and help us to advance ourselves further. I truly believe that drones will better us not just our lives, but better us as a human race. So the next time you see a drone, look at it not as a threat, but as a glimpse into the future.
So, to be completely honest with you, I've always had a slightly above average level of appreciation for the underwater world. As a kid, I spent every spare second of my summers that I could in the water. I remember strapping on my mask and my fins and diving down to the depths to hunt for tiger sharks, manta rays, and killer whales. Unfortunately for little me, I never really did find anything, but that's probably due to the fact that I was diving in Lake Ontario. I also occasionally get excited over things like never-before-seen footage from the back of a sea turtle. Now, before I watched this footage, I liked to think I had a pretty good idea of what sea turtles did in their spare time. They didn't appear to be the most behaviorally diverse of creatures and, frankly, seemed to lead pretty boring lives. But while I was watching this footage, I watched this turtle forced to dart in and out of old abandoned fishing equipment and almost mistake a plastic shopping bag as its lunch. And I realized that there was one thing that was obviously a huge part of this turtle's life that frankly had never even crossed my mind. Trash. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Flight Sergeant Olding, and I am here today to talk with you about the environmental stewardship of Canadian waters. Now, if this were just a problem for one little sea turtle off of the coast of Nova Scotia, frankly, it wouldn't be that big of a problem. But unfortunately, as we all know, that simply is not the case. According to National Geographic, at this moment, there are over 5 trillion pieces of plastic garbage in our oceans, and that number is growing steadily every single day. And garbage isn't even the only problem. A study in the journal Science states that the cod stocks off of the East Coast may never fully recover from the overfishing of their populations. And just this past September, a young humpback whale was found dead after it got caught up in abandoned fishing equipment off of the coast of British Columbia. Marine habitats are the largest ecosystem on our planet. But that doesn't mean that they're a bottomless source of food, or that plastic and oil has no effect. The ocean is absolutely essential to every part of our lives, from the oxygen and the food that it produces, to the sheer number of businesses that rely on the ocean for transportation. As of today, only 1% of our oceans are environmentally protected areas. According to the World Wildlife Fund, that number has to grow to at least 30%. Now, I know that sometimes it can feel like marine destruction is just kind of one of those things that's happening over there that that it's inevitable and we should just try and limit the damage being done rather than actually hope to fix it. Nobody is denying that the problem is serious, but at the same time, it doesn't appear like it's being taken all that seriously. It has been estimated that for every foot of global coastline, there are 5 plastic bags contaminating our oceans. And Canada has the longest coastline in the world. Now, there aren't literally 5 plastic bags on every foot of our shoreline, and I'm not suggesting that we all swear off seafood. But action does need to be taken to protect the oceans within our borders. Honestly, it can be as simple as recycling instead of throwing our old stuff out, or buying our seafood from a more sustainable source. Currently, there are many organizations that are diligently striving to protect our oceans, and as a nation, we are making progress. It has been made illegal to fish for certain species in the hopes that they can rebuild their population. The standards for fishing equipment have changed to prevent damage to small fish and other bycatch. And in 2012, plastic recycling was up 10% from the previous year. But why should we stop there? Like I said, we shouldn't just try and reduce the damage being done to our oceans so that we can meet a certain standard. No. Let's strive for healthy oceans and for rebuilt stocks. Let's strive for sustainable fishing and for clean waters. Let's strive for the environmental stewardship of Canadian waters. And if that seems like too daunting of a task, just remember, we're doing it for that little sea turtle off the coast of Nova Scotia.
The Air Cadet program is profoundly important to Canada. Why? Because it has a magical power. It can transform Canadian youth. Ladies and gentlemen, don't waste time on library books or on the History Channel to look up an answer. Simply look at me, size me up, and examine my cadet career. You will be amazed. You will see just how this program transformed me, an average kid, into a skillful pilot, a strong leader, and a good citizen. I came from a very protective family. My mom told me I couldn't even think about driving a car before turning 18. But they made one mistake. They sent me to Air Cadets and exposed me to aviation. I was still such a timid boy. My first glider flight, my whole body trembled for those 15 minutes. Thankfully, my pilot noticed my fear, and he explained, gliding is just controlled falling with elegance. From that moment on, I was hooked on flying. My eyes opened. It changed my life. I applied for the gliding and power scholarships. I went from a kid who didn't know anything about aviation, who never thought about driving a car, to now having 2 pilot's licenses. It's really too bad for my mom. She now has so much more to worry about. The cadet program trains hundreds and thousands of young pilots. It's no wonder data from Transport Canada reveals 67% of airline pilots are our ex-cadets. Moving on, let's look at how the cadet program helped me grow my leadership ability. I remember when I was 12 years old, eager to be on my first cadet summer camp. Would we read from The Art of War by Sun Tzu? Practice making tough decisions? What would they have us do that would make us into battle-hardened leaders? Well, the first lesson I learned was how to properly make my bed. Hear me out. I had to use a ruler to measure the 6-inch fold of a bedsheet, a protractor to measure the 45-degree angle of a hospital corner. Making my bed took me 2 hours. At the end of course, I was a bed-making expert. But more than that, I realized I didn't just learn how to make a bed. No, I learned that to be a good leader, you have to look at all the tiny details. To be a good leader, you can never compromise on your personal standard, even with the smallest of tasks. These lessons helped me become the chief of my squadron. Of course, I make sure every cadet in my squadron can make the perfect bed. And for the parents of the crowd, if your child isn't making their bed, contact me, because I can help. And lastly, let's see how cadets taught me the values of citizenship. I can't remember a single Remembrance Day at my high school where it has been completely silent during just the moment of silence. How unfortunate is that? Every time I've heard a Facebook notification, a text message being sent. If not for the cadet program, I fear I would be one of those students, glued to their smartphone. But we are cadets, and we were raised differently. This past year, I was in a cadet parade amongst 150 other cadets, teenagers, who chose to leave their phones at home because we understand the sacrifices our veterans made for us and the respect they deserve. The cadet program molded me into a good and proud citizen. I can't imagine what my life would be without cadets. It transformed me, a shy, timid, quiet boy. Check out what cadets has made me now. A licensed pilot, a competent leader, and most importantly, a responsible citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to challenge every single one of you. Knock on your neighbors' doors, tell your friends, and encourage your children to join cadets. The most amazing youth program you will find. Give youth a wing. Send them to fly high. Mr. Chair.
Imagine you're at a backyard party in the war-torn city of Afghanistan, chatting with friends, enjoying the food. It was a clear night sky, and children were playing nearby. The party was great, when suddenly you heard an ominous hissing sound, getting louder and louder. And boom! A deafening explosion threw you out of your seat. Scary screams of horror followed. You were half conscious, and you were in the middle of a devastation of what was a birthday celebration moments ago. The backyard was just hit by a drone missile. Honored judges, worthy competitors, and guests, I am Corporal Velasco, and I am on a mission to persuade your opinions on drones. Are they a threat or progress? What are drones? Drones are remote control aircrafts. Drones can be classified according to control, robotic process automation, where there's a ground pilot, and unmanned aerial vehicles, which are programmed with a flight course before takeoff. Drones can also be classified according to propulsion, either propeller or jet, and can be further classified in terms of use, such as civilian or military. Although the controversy on the use of civilian drones is starting to boil, I will focus mostly on the issues of its non-civilian use. Do you think the militarized use of flying drones should be deemed a threat to us? Is someone up there watching us? Are we safe? A year ago, in Washington, D.C., there was an important meeting held in the White House. It went well, and suddenly, stop, remember, yelled, "There's something in the courtyard!" It was a drone that crashed inside the secure perimeter of the White House. In a panic, the building went into lockdown. Lockdown? You might ask? I thought of that too. Hey, leave that poor thing alone. It's just a toy. What's the big fuss? Why were they so alarmed? Comrade, if you do not know, there is a tiny camera on it. The first UAV drone project commenced after the 9/11 attack. Some people were astonished at this new invention, while many others watched in horror as target after target were destroyed by ground pilots thousands of miles away. Too bad a high-value target was in that dinner party. Almost your last supper, right? Now, you don't need an enemy to gate crash the party. The place can be blown to an oblivion from a safe distance. Since then, many innocent lives were lost just to eliminate a few targets. How many more? Now, turn those frowns upside down, because I'll discuss reasons why drones should be considered a progress to the future of mankind. How much do you think it costs to send a troop to the battlefield? When weaponized drones first appeared, critics asked, how much do these drones cost? Well, you don't need to be a genius to figure this out. You'll be amazed to know that sending a troop costed 3 times more than the drone to do the mission. Not to mention the cost of lives lost. The savings can be used to build schools for better education, or hospitals, or for scientific research. We can also use the savings to build more civilian-use drones. Now tell me, what's the best thing a drone can do for you? Deliver stuff? Hold your drinks? How about saving your life? Imagine you're lost in a thick forest, alone in the midst of giant trees. You've lost your voice screaming, help! Anybody. And when you're at the tip of losing hope, a roaring sound echoed on the treetops. A search drone spotted you. You and many lost others have been found in record time, thanks to the drones. Victims trapped in collapsed buildings and tunnels have been rescued, thanks to the drones. A nuclear spill in Japan was averted after the quake, but hey, thanks to the drones. Mixed feelings about the drones now, all you not? I do. Some drones are made for great destruction, but many are built to save lives. Some drones are built to spy on people, but many are designed to do the job faster. So take a good look at that drone before you throw a rock at it. It may be your lifesaver. And my message, drone pilots out there, in the words of Uncle Ben to Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you.
How did Vimy Ridge contribute to Canada's recognition as a nation? War. 1 century ago, this April, a battle had taken place. Vimy Ridge took place in World War I throughout the years of 1914 to 1918. The Great War made Canada a separate independent nation that we all know today. Vimy Ridge is a historical ground and battle associated with brutality, but also invokes feelings of pride, perseverance, dedication, and love for your country. The Battle of Vimy Ridge in France in 1917 is fluently called the most important and bloodiest in Canadian history. The commander of the 28th Battalion at Vimy once recalled, "It was Canada from the Atlantic to the Parade I thought then. I think today. When I was a few minutes, I witnessed the birth of a country." This breakthrough promoted Canada as a middle power in the world stage and issued respect. The Battle of Vimy was extremely important as it granted a new seat at the United Nations and independence from Great Britain. The aftermath of Vimy resulted in other nations viewing Canada as an independent nation and separate from its previous controller. This accomplishment pushed Canada to be more involved in the world problems that the Canadian population sees as a democracy. Furthermore, striving to correct crises of both the 20th and 21st century. This may also include crises such as the Arab-Israeli conflict, India-Pakistan conflicts, and closer to date, the Syrian refugee crisis that we all are aware of today. Numerous boys, a majority between 16 and 19 years of age, volunteered from all parts of Canada's vast lands, from the Great Atlantic to Quebec, Maritimes, and British Columbia, came forth on that day of April 9th, united as one, fighting side by side, demonstrating how a diverse country can come together in their time of need and ignore past experiences, furthering Canada's portrait to the world. These same boys went forth to serve further for the country and open a way for victory a year and a half later. The heroes of Vimy displayed values of peace, tolerance, freedom, and respect for your fellow person, and have united us and brought us closer together. These values demonstrate what a country Canada is today. Les 4 divisions séparées qui ont participé à la bataille ont été confrontées au défi de s'emballer une crête que les plus expérimentés soldats ne pouvaient pas. Cependant, au lieu d'utiliser des vieux tactiques sous la dictation d'Albert Einstein, la définition de la folie est de faire la même chose encore et en temps à des résultats différents. Cette mentalité est considérée tout au long de la liberté d'expression de la démocratie du Canada est l'un des nombreuses caractéristiques qui constituent l'entité du Canada. Ces tactiques, nouvelles pratiques qui leur permettaient de gagner la crête, que tout le monde sur terrain savait exactement ce que la mission était et sont clairs sur la façon de l'accomplir. Often cited as the beginning of Canada's evolution from Dominion to an independent nation, the Battle of Vimy Ridge displayed bravery and sacrifice. Today, the Vimy Foundation is working to spread the word to Canada's youth through initiatives like the Vimy Prize and Vimy Pin, so that all Canadians understand the importance of Vimy to the nation's identity. In memory of this critical sacrifice, France granted Canada 107 hectares of land in Vimy to build and maintain a memorial. That iconic site is today one of the most stirring of all First World War monuments, and is certainly one of the most prized war memorials that is looked upon every day. In conclusion, 0500 of the 9th morning of April, a country, Canada, which changed the land of diversity, multiculturalism, history, and freedom. These prevailing justifications make clear that Canada is the way it is today from the actions that had taken place at Vimy Ridge that fateful morning. Thank you.
Now, I'm sure that anyone in this room, or in this grand country in general, is proud to say, I am Canadian. We are proud to be Canadian because we are proud of what we have done in our history. Soon, Canada will be 150 years old, and as it draws near, we start to look back into the past and feel proud of the amazing accomplishments we have achieved throughout our history. One of these amazing accomplishments is the Battle of Vimy Ridge, where the 4 divisions of the Canadian Corps took the hilltop point of Vimy Ridge, where the surrounding area could be seen for miles, and the German lines would be easily visible to the naked eye. After the Battle of the Somme had concluded in late 1916, the Canadians, fed up with the amount of losses they had suffered at the Somme, asked the British forces if they could take on a battle themselves. They obliged and give the Canadians the impossible task of taking Vimy Ridge. The Germans had held Vimy Ridge since the beginning of the war, and it was a strategic point for observing the battlefield over the Western Front. The French had tried to retake the ridge through May and September of 1915, but were unable to make any progress on the ridge. The British tried to take the ridge during the Battle of the Somme, but lacked the resources to continue the fight and were relieved by the Canadians in October of 1916, where they began planning their attack. The new Canadian commander, General Arthur Currie, had learned from the mistakes suffered at the Somme and implemented a new plan. Instead of blindly running up the hill and having many men cut down by machine gun fire, the men would appear from halfway up the ridge from a network of underground tunnels and would hide behind a slew of artillery fire known as a creeping barrage. The German stronghold would be bombarded, and then as soon as it stopped, the Canadians would advance several yards before the bombardment started once more. And every single man knew the battle plan, not just the officers. They knew the ins and outs of the ridge from weeks of practicing on a full-scale model of the ridge, completed after weeks of gathering intelligence from aerial observation and trench raids. On the morning of April 9th, 1917, after a week of artillery bombardment, known as the Week of Hell to the Germans, the guns erupted once more over the Western Front. At precisely 05:30, the Canadians advanced out of their tunnels towards the German lines at Vimy Ridge. Many described it as the birth of a nation. This was the day that Canada proved itself as a nation and as a fighting force. One boy wrote home, "Mother, as I looked left and right, all I saw were Canadians." And by the end of the day, the ridge was practically ours. And on April 12th, 1917, the Germans surrendered to the Canadians. We had done it. Against all odds, the Canadians had taken Vimy Ridge, but not without the brave sacrifice of nearly 4,000 men's lives and nearly 10,000 casualties. These men are part of the reason why we remember. As the Canadians looked atop Vimy Ridge, you can only imagine the immense pride they felt. For what two separate armies, probably stronger than our own, were unable to do over many months, Canadians were able to do in just a matter of 3 days. The same boy wrote home, "And Mother, I thought, we are a nation. This is us." The Canadians, after this, never lost another battle for the rest of the war. We would go down as one of the greatest fighters of the entire First World War. And that's how Vimy Ridge contributed to Canada's recognition as a nation. But it's not over. On April 9th, 2017, 100 years to the day, I was on Vimy Ridge. And I cannot begin to describe to you how it felt to be around so many Canadians, to stand on the ground, on the battlefield that helped define Canada as a nation. While I was in France, an older gentleman came up to us. I couldn't speak his language. I don't speak French. But what he said, I will never forget for the rest of my life. Long live the friendship between France and Canada. And this is all thanks to Vimy Ridge and how it defined Canada and ourselves as a nation. It's probably the greatest reminder of who Canadians are. Chair.
Throughout life, we are faced with many decisions. I, Warrant Officer 2nd Class Dalton Lounsbury from 294 Chatham Kinsmen Air Cadet Squadron, am not exempt from this rule. Many of these decisions may be hard to make. Sometimes, it may even seem easier to not make the decision yourself. The lousy thing is, life doesn't always let us make this outcome. In fact, it is impossible to just do nothing when it comes to juggling the plethora of attention-seeking activities that chase us. So, Now that we are brought to this conclusion, how do I balance my cadet career with the rest of my life? Before we can begin to balance items within a schedule, we must know their weight. The weight of a task that you must do can only be determined by you. Every person has different skills and abilities, and as a result, they are able to handle different tasks with varying degrees of ease and with varying amounts of time. The tasks that I have chosen to fill my time include cadet, martial arts, Sears drama, and my school's improv team. To top it off, I have to participate in the typical activities that a teenager must, such as school, chores, and socializing. I find these tasks to sufficiently fill my schedule. You may disagree with this statement, but at least give me a chance to defend myself by giving you an example of my typical week. On Monday nights, I direct Sears drama for an hour and a half. From there, I head home till I finish preparing for my regular parade night at cadets. This can include fine-tuning my lesson or finishing my uniform. From there, I head to my regular parade night, which lasts for 2.5 hours. Immediately following that, I have a half-an-hour drill team practice to conclude my night. Tuesdays, I voluntarily teach martial arts for 3 hours before my own 1-hour lesson. Depending on the time of the year, Wednesday brings me to either a 2-hour drill team practice or a 2-hour ground school lesson. Thursdays are quite similar to Tuesdays, except I only teach martial arts for 2 hours before my 1-hour lesson. As for Fridays and the weekends, what consumes my time varies from a demo team-related event with karate to volunteering through cadets. I find the schedule to be overwhelming at times. This can especially be the case when homework from school starts piling up. But I am not complaining. I enjoy each of these activities, and there are many teenagers I know who spend more time doing things in their own schedules. The delightful thing is, this schedule has never defeated me, and I owe it to a couple of strategies. The most important thing in balancing a schedule is to know what the schedule is being balanced around. I'm talking about setting a goal. Now, there are many different types of goals, but it is important to make a SMART goal. What I mean by this is that you want a goal that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. Now, it may seem like a nuisance to actually take out a piece of paper with the word SMART written at the top and begin writing down your goal, and I'm not saying that's what you need to do. But it is important to at least take the time to think out a realistic goal in your head and plan how you are going to achieve it. My current long-term goal is to become a pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Each of my listed activities helps bring me one step closer, whether they teach me the direct skills needed or help build the characteristics required to be successful for the job. You also don't always have to have the same goal. In my past, I have set year-long goals based off of what I would like to achieve by the end of that year. For example, when I knew I was going to be grading for my first degree black belt, I decided to spend that year focused more on martial arts, whereas other years I've decided to focus more on cadets or my other activities. This strategy works in unison with my next strategy, which is prioritizing. Once you know your goal, you have to decide what you can do to help you achieve it. If we flash back to my previous example of cadets versus martial arts, I came face to face with a very difficult decision. I was scheduled to compete at the provincial level for effective speaking on the same day that I had to attend a meeting so that I could grade for my first degree black belt. I prioritized in accordance with my goal of attaining the black belt by attending the meeting over competing at the provincial level. I also used my overlapping goal mentioned earlier of becoming a pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force as a basis for many decisions based around balancing my life. A brief example of this is that ever since I joined high school, I had all my courses planned in accordance to becoming a pilot. When all of the goal setting and prioritizing is done, I am left with that weekly schedule I went through earlier. My cadet career has its place in there, as do my other activities. But what truly makes this balance of activities special is that my cadet career also has its place within my martial arts career, my drama career, and my school career. You see, because each of these activities help benefit the others by helping to build the person that I have become, who is able to go into any activity with a variety of skills. I believe that everyone is able to build upon themselves when they participate in a variety of activities, and that if they use the skills I spoke of, these activities will virtually balance themselves. So now I call upon you. Fill your schedules. fight through the time constraints and become a better person.
Good afternoon, judges, officers, guests, and my fellow cadets. I am Corporal Ainabe. I'd like to start by saying that I am proud. I am proud to look upon the red and white colors of our nation's flag and breathe the free air. I am proud that this year marks Canada's 150th year of standing as a solidified and united country. I am proud that this year marks Canada's 150th year of Canadian Confederation. Now I notice that one thing people don't realize when they come to think of our country is how hard we have worked to get here, to reach where Canada is today. All the brave men and women who laid down their lives to make Canada a free country and defend our borders from attack. Though increasingly, we defend our borders by going over to other countries and ensuring that our enemies never come close. Just last year, I asked my friend, why do you celebrate Canada's Confederation every year? Their reply shocked me. They didn't even know we had a Canada Day. In the time that I have, I will discuss Canada's history from the early 1800s to the late 1870s. First, I will start with Canada's past problems and how we achieved Confederation. Then, I will end with all the accomplishments we achieved as a nation. My goal is that by the end of my speech, you will have a firm grasp on Canada's history as a country and will discover the importance of why we celebrate Canada's Confederation. Our problems and struggles begin in the early 1800s, when Canada was owned by Great Britain and was home to the colonies of British North America. Like most places in the world, the colonies had many struggles, such as economy, protection from threats, and the repeal of the Corn Laws. Smaller colonies, such as PEI and New Brunswick, were in huge debt and had no real way of paying it off, other than Confederation. Most colonies, such as Canada East and Canada West, didn't have many soldiers and were vulnerable to attacks from outside threats. And with the Fenians constantly trying to raid the other colonies and hold them for ransom, smaller colonies and islands had a lot to be worried about. Not only that, but the repeal of the Corn Laws, a treaty that allowed the colonies of British North America to have grain and corn exchange with Great Britain nearly tax-free, had a negative impact on all of the colonies. Now, they would have to pay more to trade with their main trading partner. With all of the problems and struggles the colonies face, some colonies decided to get together and form a nation. There were many debates and conferences held on the topic of Canadian Confederation, as well as mixed opinions from all of the colonies. On July 1st, 1867, Canada finally achieved Confederation. However, not all of the colonies joined at first. As the years went on, the remaining colonies decided it would be better for them to get rid of their problems and join the movement. Slowly, they started to join. With Confederation, we had many feats. Prime Minister Sir John A. Macdonald, our very first Prime Minister, launched his idea of the Intercolonial Railway, a railway that would help transport goods and supplies throughout Canada. And, thanks to our combined forces and a little help from the United States, we stormed the Fenians. Also, all of the colonies in debt had their prices paid off by much wealthier colonies. If you ask me, these achievements are nothing to scoff at. 150 years of hard work and accomplishments. Through many wars, social and economical problems, Canada kept a strong and independent country. This is why it is important to remember and celebrate all the great deeds the men and women before us have done to make Canada a free and powerful country. I believe that if Canadians could celebrate our success as a country, it would make Canada's 150th anniversary a wonderful celebration. It's been my pleasure presenting to you today. As you learned, Canada had lots of past problems and conflicts, and the road to Confederation was not easy. But in the end, it was beneficial. I hope, like me, you are proud. Proud to recognize our achievements as Canadians. Proud to learn the benefits and beauty of Confederation. Proud to say that you are Canadian. I realize we've become a very long way these past 150 years, and I hope I've helped you realize this as well. And of you, I ask one thing. On Canada Day, remember this speech. Remember the importance of Canadian Confederation. Remember that you have a reason to be proud. Thank you.
So for most Canadians, what comes to mind when they think of peacekeeping? Well, for most Canadians, they probably think of blue-helmeted UN peacekeepers. For most Canadians, peacekeeping is at its face a positive thing. For most Canadians, peacekeeping is something their country should and does participate in. But is all that really the case? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Flight Sergeant Pauze, and in the next 5 minutes, I'll present an overview of Canada's past in relations to peace, where we currently find ourselves in our international efforts, and where we're heading with peacekeeping, and that, not just in the sense of where we're sending our troops. Let's begin with a little historical overview, shall we? In the past, Canada has had a global reputation for its role in maintaining peace. As a matter of fact, we played a very important role in establishing the very concept, because it's in the 1950s, due to Lester B. Pearson, who at the time was Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister, and he pressured the United Nations to send over 6,000 troops in Egypt following the Suez Canal crisis. This would be the UN's first peacekeeping mission, and Mr. would go on to get both the Prime Minister's office and a Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts. Peacekeeping would then go on to become an integral part of our national identity. Since then, Canada has contributed over 125,000 peacekeepers in over 35 countries, all with the noble goal of maintaining peace. But these missions have not been without cost. Because of those 125,000 brave men and women, 122 did not return. And in the last decade, the practicality of peacekeeping missions has been put into question. Their cost in both dollars and lives considered too expensive. Today, Canada has slightly more than 100 peacekeepers abroad, which means we rank a measly 67th among contributing nations. We have regrettably lost our status as one of the most progressive countries in peacekeeping matters. Recently, however, things might have begun to change, because it's been a bit over 3 months now that the government of Canada announced to be sending 10 police officers to help maintain the peace in Colombia. Finally, we're starting to get an idea of where the Liberals are going to send nearly 650 peacekeepers and $500 million they've promised over the next 4 years. Does this initiative mark a return to peacekeeping for Canada? I sure hope so. But not everyone shares my optimistic opinion, because as Canadian military historian Jack Grandstein puts it, you have a public that believes you go out, you put on a blue beret, and everyone sings hallelujah, and everything's all fine. But that's really not the case, because peacekeeping doesn't work if there's no peace to keep. And some of the proposed places Canadian peacekeepers might find themselves include Congo, Mali, and Syria, places that are kind of just more active war zones. Now, there's even critics of the actual UN peacekeeping missions themselves, and the ill-fated 1994 mission in Rwanda, led by Canadian General Romeo Dallaire, is often cited as a prime example for the failure of peace. Because over a period of 100 days, nearly 1 million of Rwanda's citizens were murdered in a systematic genocide while the UN forces stood by. What little weapons these 130 personnel had, they were prohibited from using unless directly attacked. And by the time the UN officially recognized the genocide and reinforcements were sent, the country had been completely taken over by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, and the country has been fairly slow to recover under them. Now, there are other issues with UN peacekeepers, like how do you guarantee their impartiality? Taking another look at Rwanda, we see that a large portion of these peacekeepers are coming from Belgium. And that's the very country that, following the Second World War, effectively took control of the area by solidifying its ethnic divides. And another issue lies in the United Nations' limited resources and budgets. Globally, the UN's peacekeeping budget stands at around $7.8 billion, which sounds really good, till you consider that that's down 5% from last year's budget, and that $7.8 billion represents less than 0.5% of the nearly $2 trillion of global military spending. Now, I still think that by supporting peacekeeping, we're moving in the right direction. Because I think our Defense Minister, Harjit Sajjan, said it best. Canada cannot remain an island of stability in an ocean of turmoil. Today, peacekeeping is more important than ever. And by supporting peacekeeping, we're also supporting values of equality, freedom, and respect. And it's by these values that we're proud to be a multicultural society, a place where people of different backgrounds who might find themselves in conflict overseas live together. And I think it's really interesting how General Romeo Dallaire, despite having witnessed firsthand the atrocities and neglect in Rwanda, is still a prominent militant for peacekeeping. He states that the many conflicts the UN is trying to manage will have an effect on Canada, whether that's through refugee crises or acts of terrorism. And if we take a look at Europe, and they're having those issues stemming from the ongoing power struggle in Syria. In conclusion, I hope you now understand my firm belief in the positive role of peacekeeping. But today, peacekeeping through the United Nations does have its flaws. But with our government having set its sights on a seat on the UN Security Council, we might find ourselves in a position to fix those flaws. What I really truly think is the most important is that over the next few years, we're going to learn whether we, Canada, whether we are a selfish nation or a generous one, by deploying troops not just for national interest, but also for our national values. Thank you.
A lot of people in this country have a habit of hating on technology. Technology brings us apart from each other, technology distracts us, technology causes cancer, technology takes our jobs, blah, blah, blah. My history teacher even once said that there would be a World War III over cell phones. The problem is, regardless of how much blame gets thrown around, my 158-gram piece of technology that I carry around with me is not going to cause the deaths of hundreds of millions of people anytime soon. So why are drones any different? Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, today I would like to prove to you why drones represent progress in our society rather than posing a threat, as many people suggest they might. Before we start, we have to take a look at what a drone is. According to dictionary.com, a drone is any unmanned aircraft or ship that is guided remotely. What impresses me about that is how it is possible for people to hate on drones through a 9-word definition. Even Donald Trump, arguably the king of unsubstantiated hate, needs more words than that to prove his point. Let's remind ourselves, that definition includes almost any unmanned, flying, or floating vehicle. A children's toy helicopter is a drone. A missile used to kill enemies of our country is a drone. Any small piece of plastic that can fly by remote control is a drone. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about how drones benefit Canadians. Imagine a future in which a package could be delivered from anywhere in Ontario straight to your front door, all in under 30 minutes. With drone delivery services, such as the one currently being trialed by Amazon in the UK, then this could soon become reality. The possibilities are endless. You could order a video game and play it that night, or you could order a pizza and have lots of choice between where you got it from. You would never have to go more than half an hour without milk, bread, or eggs, when those things can be sent by drone. Let's look at another way drones help us out. Reporting. A small drone with a camera attached to it costs around a few $100s. Meanwhile, a helicopter costs millions of dollars, not to mention fuel costs, camera equipment, and the salary of whoever has to fly. This saves a huge amount of money for anyone in the business. In addition to that, it makes reporting much more accessible. Cheap drones allow anybody, not just millionaires, to give their 2 cents on what's happening in the world. Drones also make life much safer for foreign correspondents. Rather than having to be directly in a war zone, they can view it from a distance. This is incredibly important when reporting in places such as Aleppo, where landmines are commonplace and being hit by a stray bullet is a real danger. Drones have another important use in the war against terrorism. They were first used by NATO during the 1999 war in Kosovo, and have since been used in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. Having traditional planes performing simple jobs such as reconnaissance poses a danger to whoever has to fly the aircraft. These dangers are evident when looking back on incidents such as the 1960 U-2 incident, during which an American spy plane was shot down over Soviet airspace, leading to the capture of the pilot, Francis Gary Powers, who had to spend over a year and a half in a Soviet jail. Had that plane been an unmanned drone, then that would never have been a problem. However, the use of drones in combat doesn't stop at just reconnaissance. In World War II, Canadian pilots would fly bombers into German, Japanese, and Italian territory to hit their infrastructure and defenses. This was incredibly dangerous. Over the course of the war, over 40,000 British and 50,000 American aircraft were shot down, leading to the deaths of thousands of pilots. However, today we have drones such as the Reaper or the X-47, which can attack targets that would otherwise be unreachable or too dangerous to human pilots. So next time you look outside and you see a drone flying by and you curse it for flying near your property, I hope all of you will think a little harder about how the technology behind that drone has benefited us. How much time has it saved during deliveries? How many Canadian Forces pilots could it save? How has it made life safer and better for all of us? It would be nice if, on the eve of Canada's 150th anniversary, we move forward with our country's progress rather than allowing it to fall behind.
My watch let off a pale bluish glow as I dialed back the seconds.
Dialed back the seconds, you might ask.
Yes, for you see, I am a time traveler with a watch that can take me through the very fabric of time.
My incredible journey from the future has brought me to 2017, the 150th anniversary of Canada's Confederation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, honorable judges, and most welcome guests. While most people learn history through boring lessons, I have taken it a step further and have traveled back in time to relive Canada's history. It is a journey worth knowing and worth telling, filled with a collection of shared dreams, shared ideals, and a shared future. Canada's monumental journey starts off on July 1st, 1867, when large meetings take place in Charlottetown and Quebec City. After some noisy debating, the decision was made to bring the British colonies of Canada, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia together to form early Canada. John A. Macdonald went on to become Canada's first Prime Minister, and here's a little secret. I voted for him. In 1880, O Canada was performed for the first time. Sure, I'm glad I practiced that song, because it would soon become our national anthem. Some 50 years later, I watched in awe
as two brilliant Canadian scientists discovered insulin, allowing millions of people to fight back against diabetes. In 1982, I held my breath as Queen Elizabeth II signed into law the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This bill gives all Canadians the rights that they enjoy today. Freedom of speech, freedom of thought, the right to maple syrup and bacon. Well, you get the idea. Not only has Canada had a lot of significant events, it has also contributed hundreds of inventions that have changed the world forever. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone, the first source of long-distance, instant communication. Without this much talked about invention, we'd still be using 2 cans and a length of string. Some people think that the sky's the limit, but this isn't the case for Canada. Canadians have not only ventured out into space, but have invented machines that are used there, such as the Canadarm. Well, folks, you see my watch right here? It features another Canadian invention, standard time. Believe me when I say, we Canadians will go on to conquer time itself. But that's another story for, another time. But 150 years after its founding, what is the sum total of Canada as a country? Is it simply a country of brilliant minds and inventions? A country filled with polite individuals who always hold open the door for others? Or does its contribution and potential go much deeper than that? While it is safe and secure, with a high quality of life and a great education system, it is also diverse and tolerant and accepts people from every corner of the globe. Few realize Canada's pivotal contribution to the world peacekeeping effort, having invented the concept of peacekeepers in the United Nations and actively contributed to the same. However, a changing world climate has sadly seen a decline in Canada's peacekeeping involvement in the last decade. But in a world filled with divided nations and a growing intolerance of religions and cultures, there is an opportunity for Canada to continue to shine. Canada can once again become a beacon of hope for a fractured humanity so desperately in need of a country to lead the way. As a time traveler, I have witnessed it all. But at the end of the day, I am struck by a deep realization. We, the Air Cadets of Canada, have inherited the legacy of Canadians before us, irrespective of where we were born. It is therefore our responsibility to ensure that this great country continues to welcome and absorb people from different countries, cultures, languages, and religions. Our strength lies in our diversity, so we must ask ourselves, will we allow it to change? Or will we ensure that it continues for the next 150 years? The time to change our future is now.
Imagine your only dream was to go to space, to escape the bonds of Earth and see what no other has, or even just to escape the bonds of gravity and fly above all else. And imagine those dreams being crushed because at the time you are a woman. This was the case until 1910 and then once again in 1963. The first successful aircraft was built in 1903 by the Wright brothers, but the first woman to obtain her pilot's license was Barnas Mont de la Cour in 1910. And the first woman to ever leave the captivating bonds of Earth and see what no other has was Valentina Tereshkovic in 1963. Women have made huge impacts upon aerospace, from assisting to create organizations that to this day still assist men and women throughout aerospace. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Flight Sergeant Gunn from 812 Squadron in Hanover. And if you haven't guessed it already, today I'd like to talk to you about women in aerospace. Most of you should be familiar with Amelia Earhart, who was the first woman to solo across the Pacific Ocean in 1935. She was also granted a Distinguished Flying Cross and as well had published a handful of novels. In 1937, when she flew across the Pacific Ocean for a second time, she disappeared and was never found. Women like her pushed for what they wanted. They went somewhere that other women were afraid to go and showed men that women can do just what men can. As Amelia Earhart once said, quote, "Women must try to do things as men have tried, and their failures must be but a challenge to others," unquote. A woman who pushed for the formation of female regiments was the commander of 587 Bomber Regiment and was killed on the front lines. Her name was Mara Kosvik. She was a navigator as well as a Gold Star hero for the Soviet Union. Pauline Gover was a woman who helped to form the women's section of Air Transport Auxiliary and as well was the first woman to sit in, let alone be allowed to fly, a Royal Air Force aircraft. Now, so far we've just touched on the topic altogether. We've just discussed the beginnings of women starting into aerospace. Over the last 56 years, we have been going into space. And over these last 56 years, we have sent 534 people into space. To this day, NASA has 12 female astronauts. Russia has 2. Over the last 56 years, 477 men have gone into space, followed by 57 women. The first was in 1963, when Valentina Tereshkovic was declared the first woman to go to space and return alive. In 1960, though, the Soviet Union had what we believe to be a conspiracy almost, which was later found evidence but they refused to admit. There was evidence found by the Jieth and Gorkin brothers that in 1960, the Soviet Union sent 3 manned aircrafts into space, 1 piloted by a woman. After I looked into this conspiracy a little bit more, the Jieth and Gorkin brothers had actually found evidence that in 1960, the Soviet Union had sent a manned aircraft into space containing a woman. They had captured audio recordings of this woman begging for help upon her aircraft and later captured audio recordings of her suffocating to death. To this day, Russia refuses to admit that in 1960 they sent 3 manned aircrafts into space. But just before Valentina Tereshkovic, the states were given a chance to bring the first woman into space. Jerry Cobb, a woman who at 19 was teaching men to fly aircrafts and held 3 world aviation records, was given a chance to go through astronaut testing. After passing all 3 phases of this testing, she was still denied the spot on the Mercury 13 mission because of her gender. 22 years later, the states rectified this when they sent the first American woman into space. Upon the Orbiter Challenger, they sent Sally Ryder. Women have pushed for what they wanted through aerospace. And these women individually took a step. But as a collective, they broke through the glass ceiling. In conclusion today, there is one thing I would like you to think about. Compare what little technology we had in the past and what we did then, 56 years ago, when we sent the first man into space and the first woman 2 years later. Compare what we did then to what we, as an advanced society, could do now with our outrageously more advanced technology. Imagine, our limitations are only in our minds. That is all.